there's gonna be a lot of stuff in these slides, but I really hope that I can like spark some inspiration for you on like how you could catalyze a community in science and in scientific participation in volunteerism in your own community, and also how yeah, you could like get together on your like own topic that you care about and like with your community of peers in and outside science. I also called the talk Beyond SciComm because I really hope to spark a few ideas on like what are the boundaries of traditional scientific communications and how the engagement of scientists with society can actually push that boundaries and rethink what's the engagement of scientists with society eventually. So, so first, well, just a small like dive into my journey. So I'm originally from Italy, and I started by my studies in Pisa at the University of Pisa in agricultural sciences and plant biotechnologies. Then I moved to Wageningen to do my master in plant sciences with a specialization in plant breeding. I was also involved in an Horizon 2020 project called Invite. That is also somehow linked to the topics that I'll touch today, because it was a project that was designed together by policymakers, scientists, and industry in order to improve the regulatory process of like approval of plant varieties by taking advantage of like new phenotyping and genotyping tools. So in a way, it was like a great consortium where actually you could see how like policy can benefit from science and how policy can also mandate novelty from science, etc. Then I moved to California for some time to do my internship at Carnegie Science in Stanford at the ReLab. And that's actually where my journey in bioinformatics and natural product discovery started. I actually had a couple of small stops along the way where I was an intern at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and I worked at a treaty that actually takes so basically they oversee like the exchange of plant germplasm from like the global south and biodiversity rich countries to labs across the world. So basically like Nagoya Protocol for plants, the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources. And then I also stopped in an investment fund that invests into sustainable companies, which was extremely interesting still to really grasp an interdisciplinary perspective on science. And now I landed back into Wageningen in the lab of Marnix Medema and Justin van der Hooft, which is also here in the room. And so like to kick off with my PhD, which I started about a month ago in plant natural product discovery. So to discover new metabolites and interesting pathways from plants, starting from computational tools and workflows. So I would say that actually the connecting topic of everything that I'm going to present here today, it's about engagement in volunteerism. And I was lucky enough to be engaged into like early on to like benefit from some volunteering organizations and some communities that were around my environment in my bachelor. Most of them actually were are from Italy and made of Italian people. And these communities were basically communities for peer-to-peer support, providing like mentorship for career choices, or like a mentorship for like how to find an academic job, or how you become like how you like land a software engineering job, for instance. So they were really amazing communities that gave me so much throughout the years, and in some of them I'm still like trying to give back as a mentor myself. But actually engagement in volunteering, what actually it comes down is really to, it comes down to people. So actually this is really how like all those logos come down to. So like it's really a journey of like a global communities of people that are really passionate about the topic and that really put their free time into building communities and into giving back to each other. I would say this, I was actually lucky enough that since this has always been like a big part of my journey during studies and work, I was also given some recognitions by actually the commitment and the time that I put into these organizations. And one of these, like the Society of European Affairs Professionals, where I'm actually like I am a young member, will also connect to some of the topics that we're going to discuss later about science policy. But so we started from volunteering, and I explained a little bit about how my journey looked like and what are the volunteering communities that first inspired me to give my time into volunteering. But now I want to connect volunteering with actually the sector that I guess most of us work into, which is agri-food. And like, why do we need participation and like building communities in the agri-food system? And well, I think that a very illuminating picture or like figure in my vision is actually given by this figure, which shows like the concentration within the Dutch food chain, and how the Dutch food chain, which starts from like 65,000 farmers, eventually it comes down to only 5 purchasing companies that filter out this diversity and that really make decisions of what's going to come into our table, and 25 supermarkets. So the fact that we really have this huge disparity between the diversity that we feed into the system and this very tight shrink at the center that separates consumers from the beginning is the reason why we need to build better bridges in between different stakeholders in society and different communities in the agri-food chains. I think that also something that is missing in this figure, and that would be really interesting to think about, is how first the choices that are connected with the pushing diversity into farmers and horticulturalists are made. Like, what's really like the amount of biodiversity that enters the food chain, and or new technologies that might come from science, from industry, and what's really available for farmers. And I think that a perspective that is connected with this is also relevant in plant breeding. So my favorite definition of plant breeding, and it's an industry that I've been connected to for a few years now, is that plant breeding is the science of generating diversity. Plant breeding is not just a science, but it's also an applied science, and it's also an industry in a way, right? When you want to generate diversity in plant breeding, the key is actually to come together with different kinds of stakeholders. Like, you really have to figure out like what the industry wants, what the consumers are gonna want, really want, etc. That's the only way that actually you can like really improve a crop, right? The geneticist by itself cannot do much. So, but how then do you build a participative community from science? Well, my journey into civic participation of scientists was actually started during my bachelor, when we co-founded an initiative for scientific communication in the city of Pisa, which was made of 3 different universities coming together in the city of Pisa. So the University of Pisa, Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, and Scuola Normale Superiore. And about more than 100 students that entered the WhatsApp groups that we created to find volunteers that were really motivated to go out in the street and to explain medical and agricultural biotechnologies to the public, and to be given a chance to connect with civil society and with passerbys, like people that walk in the street, like to have the chance to tell them why they are so excited about biotechnologies, about what they study, and what they think might be the impact of these technologies. And it's really the fact that we were able to build a community that was made of so many passionate students that made me think that actually the impact that you build by building these communities is so much bigger than just presenting science to the public, but it has a relevance that goes also into the domain of policy and into the domain of building actually bridges between science and society concerning decisions for the future of agri-food systems and beyond. So, and this is why I want to introduce 2 different themes that push scientific communication a little bit beyond its boundaries. So the fact is that I really think that communities of scientists that come together show us that like there's a totally different like stakeholder group that is arising in science, which is specifically made of the youngest generations of scientists that are pushed by like a motivation of going into science that it's really of like building social impact. And at the same time, this also comes together with the fact that society is also changing in terms of like the expectations that they have from science. And so the fact that the motivations of new scientists are changing and that the expectations of society are different really make these communities extremely important for the future of like science into policy and science into society. So while traditional scientific communication does not usually concern much with like what you do with the knowledge, it's more about like communicating and explaining to the public how like certain pieces of knowledge work, or like how certain things in science work, and it's about making science fun and like reachable and like also familiar with people. It kind of builds on the assumption that if a citizen becomes a little bit more of a scientist, then they become a better citizen. But that's a very dangerous assumption, because it kind of prevents us from building like bridges from like different stakeholders, and like from recognizing that actually being connected to local problems and to local communities could just be as valuable as like trying to bring new pieces of knowledge to the table. And so we really need all stakeholders to collaborate there. So this is why I want to start by giving a few examples on like how scientific communication can be relevant for like policy and advocacy, and how scientific communication can actually be used to leverage science for good. So a concept that I actually call scientific cooperation. And I'll be doing that thanks to two examples of organizations that I've been connected to in these few years. So first, I think that many of you might wonder, but like, why should a science get concerned with policy? And actually, there's a very nice article that was written like this past August that it's about the fact that if you want to be a scientist, you actually ought to know how science policy works, because like in many fields, it might really like limit what you can do as a scientist. And we have seen a few examples, for instance, in the case of new genomic techniques and genome editing, that actually, if you really want to be sure that what you do as a scientist, especially if you work in the applied field of sciences, is going to benefit society, you have to concern about you have to know about science policy and about how that's going to affect your field. Like, science is not going to be enough to really have society benefit from what you're doing. And though on the other side, science policy is still a domain that is under like much discussion, we have not yet figured out, and there are many different models on like how scientists should engage with policy. And specifically, like, we need more work to understand what are the better models. So, but first, I want to start with an example of like how scientists can gather around a policy issue. And in my case, actually, that kicked off with 2018, the decision of the Court of Justice that new genomic techniques, so genome editing technologies such as CRISPR-Cas9, but also others like zinc finger nuclease and also like cisgenesis, are subject to GMO regulations because of the lack of safety record. And that was actually what inspired some like fellow PhD students at Wageningen and from different universities in Belgium to come together and to start by creating this community that was based on like the idea and like the motivation that young scientists had not been engaged into the debate on new genomic techniques thus far, and that also this decision could deeply actually have a very deep effect on like the work of many of us that are working with these technologies and that they really believe that these could have some important potential for the future of agriculture and beyond. And also on the belief that like being a young scientist is actually extremely promising for opening a dialogue with the public, because given that you are not like the unreachable senior researcher, the fact that you are just a student yourself and also part of the new generation and just figuring out many things, it's very promising to like open a discussion with the public and to listening to their doubts and fears about a certain technology. So we really thought that our engagement here was very important. So actually what happened in the European context is that a study was commissioned to the European Commission to explain actually what was the state of the art of new genomic techniques, and how actually they could be, like they could hold a very high potential for delivering more sustainable agricultural targets. And this really opened the stage to more engagement from us, the fact that actually European institutions were working towards like new policy and getting all stakeholders together. So this is why actually we got a chance to speak with European institutions at multiple levels, starting from actually just a very simple email that we sent towards like the commissioner of DG Sante, so concerned with health and the environment at the European Commission. And we actually received a response which put us on the track to become officially recognize the stakeholders into this policy process. And that's exactly what happened. So thanks to a very simple email and thanks to like trying to like be like to foster discussions and to speak with different stakeholders, we were able to enter into the roadmap towards new legislation, which started in October 2021 with an inception impact assessment, which is a 4-page document that you can read online that just writes down what are the main goals for like going to like deliver new policy. The roadmap basically is aimed at arriving to a legislative proposal that would like amend the previous like decisions from the Court of Justice. So we were lucky enough actually to be engaged during this roadmap at different stages, starting from like the high-level event at the European Commission, then the public consultation, then different rounds of like interviews and surveys with stakeholders, where actually we were acting as a stakeholder that would bring forward the voices of early career researchers. And eventually this came down to the release of the proposal on July the 5th, which you can still read on the page, on the webpage of this roadmap, and to the public consultation that was running until yesterday. So despite it's very promising, you can engage with the policymakers and you can really write together policy in a way together with the relevant institutions, because we were asked for what our opinion was at different stages of this process. We're definitely not quite there yet. Like even like when a proposal is released, actually there are several steps which are called the ordinary legislative procedure. And so they start from the European Commission, that is gives the initiative and releases a legislative proposal, and then several steps where like this proposal is going to be voted a couple of times from the Council of the European Union and the Parliament. There could be a conciliation committee could be needed, and eventually it will come down to either the acceptance or the rejection of the proposal. And even if the proposal is going to go through, in terms of like the community that we have built with Gene Sprout Initiative, we think that we're going to have even more to do in terms of like outreach with the public, because like even when a new legislation is going to be there, we're going to need to build the bridges with society to explain actually what these technologies that they're going to see on their market are. And also it's not going to be all at the European level, but there's also going to be a process of like adoption in the different states. But actually, what it really came down, the engagement that we had as an organization is about people and events that we run in these different years. So I've been a board member for 2 years of the in this organization. I was there, for about 3 years during my master, and also it's very important to note that also in terms of like what we organize. We have a very strict, code of conduct for ourselves. So, for instance, we don't take money from companies. We don't participate to events that are run by industry. We only do when there are different stakeholders that actually are also invited. So, where we are not the only sort of not-for-profit there. We also, in our outreach events, we never go to the very polarized parts of the debate, but we often try to target who's uninformed and open to have a conversation with us. Another example of what an organization like this can do is campaigning. So we joined with 2 other NGOs, and we designed the Give Genes a Chance campaign, which brought us together in March 2023. Thanks to also to the European, to the Experimental School of Plant Sciences in Wageningen, we were able to bring about 70 early researchers from 19 European countries together in order to learn how to do better communication of science and how to engage better with the policymakers and with society. And just a couple of weekends ago, actually, we were campaigning in front of the central station of Brussels, where we actually tried to open dialogues with the public and the people that were.
Like you have an app named Dialogue. You can search for it in the App Store.
What? Okay, all right. I might have said series. I don't know. Apparently. And so we reached more than 200 citizens and different parts of society. All right. Okay, so here there are a few references of this initiative in case you want to connect with us or you want to explore our website. I'll leave it in for a second, but I have a couple of more things I wanna say.
Can we ask questions already?
Yeah.
I just wonder what you discussed in Brussels with the people around
when
you were campaigning.
Yeah, so actually most of the people had no idea what CRISPR-Cas or genome editing was. So it was really about talking with them, and usually we would also listen to their concerns. So they would say, GMO, and we would just ask them questions and help them think about biotechnologies, GMOs, what we want for the future of agriculture. So kind of having casual conversations with passerbys on the fact that we are scientists working on these technologies because we think they might be promising for some important targets for the future of agriculture. Yeah. But there were some nice conversations. There were a couple of people that were also informed, so they were nice things. But yeah. So I would say, Genes Sprout Initiative is definitely not the only community that has been built around this topic. But for instance, there's a network of senior researchers from 134 European plant science institutes called the EU SAGE. That actually, really sort of wants to support the future of genome editing for sustainable agriculture and food production. And what they do, for instance, is by maintaining a website of genome editing projects and applications, they sort of help to debunk myths about what is genome editing used for. For instance, on this database, you can go there and see also the updated one. You can really see what are the different types of traits that are improved thanks to these technologies. So for instance, you see that, if you were if you really thought that most of the traits would be about plant yield and growth, that's actually not really the case, but there are also many other traits related with biotic and abiotic tolerance, which some actually are way more than yield itself. You can also see that if there was a concern actually that most genome editing would be done to get a new, to insert new genes in the crop. That's actually not true, because like that's like a site-directed nuclease 3 is the only technology that is inserting genes in the plant, but SDN1 and SDN2 actually only do like an non-homologous end joining or use a template for the end joining, but they are not introducing any kind of new genetic information. So this helps to debunk myths and also is an important source for both the policy and society. But there's also another topic that I really want to touch, which is scientific cooperation. And the fact is that many of the topics that we have touched in our journey in scientific, in science policy, really concern the fact that technology is not inherently good or bad, but it can be used for either way, right? But it's also true that many examples that we actually had to deal with in these years of talking about genome editing and GMO regulation were about the fact that most science was actually, most science in this domain was actually used not really for good, right? And so many of the examples that we tried to give and the things that we tried to advocate for were more hypothetical examples of how science could be leveraged for good. So that's actually where I saw that there was a big gap into of course, saying that hypothetically technologies could be used for good, but not much movement and sense of responsibility of scientists to build collaborations that would be able to really use the science for good applications. And that's where actually my journey in connecting these two worlds started. So on the one hand, by connecting the desire of researchers to translate their research in tangible impact, which is what I saw by connecting with so many volunteering students and scientists. I really saw that there was a huge desire actually to be more engaged with society. And on the other hand, they need to deliver knowledge and technologies to local contexts and stakeholders in a more timely and more effective manner that would actually responsibilize researchers. This is actually where the Good Scientists was born. So the Good Scientists, we are a volunteer-run initiative to make science accessible and actionable for social and environmental impact, which sounds very general, but I'm gonna break it down in a second. So what we really wanna do is to connect and to create both opportunities to research, to use research, to make research tangible for social impact in any scientific field or career level, and also on the other hand for local stakeholders to give direct access to pro bono scientific expertise in any field. So what we mean usually by local stakeholders are stakeholders that are traditionally not in the chains of technology and knowledge transfer from academia, that are not well connected with scientific knowledge networks, that are geographically geographically very, very far, and that also are really connected with a local problem, and usually that are also not-for-profit stakeholders or groups of citizens. So how do we really achieve building bridges between science and these very small local actors with what I call scientific cooperation? And we have put together a few products, I would say outcomes that we are working on right now at the Good Scientists, which are on the one hand project marketplace, so an actual database marketplace feed of humanitarian and environmental projects provided by local stakeholders that actually scientists, starting from master's students to senior scientists, can look at in order to respond to requests for either consulting, advice, or available data that is provided by the NGO, or even have the opportunity to co-design research projects together or to take inspiration from a local context. The second thing that we're building is a matchmaking platform. So it is a network of scientists that are available for free consultations to basically anybody, but like mostly for the local actors that we've been talking about. So what it comes down is that it only requires for a scientist to give us 1 hour of office hours per month that they actually can schedule in their calendar, and they can leave it open for like local stakeholders like NGOs, not-for-profits, groups of citizens, to answer their questions and to maybe help them with their up-to-date knowledge about science, and be able to, in a very, very direct way, without any filter, be able to take it to the local context. And what we're also doing, is we have a blog. So we have 2 editors that are curating this blog, which is called Undoing the Ivory Tower, which you find it on our LinkedIn. We have currently a couple of stories connected with plant science, and outreach, which is about having workshops where we actually inspire usually scientists and young researchers to get into social impact. So that's it. So this is the team of volunteers that are making this possible. Of course, we're only using like a very limited part of our time. So really building like a very powerful team that acts as like different pieces in the puzzle to make something possible is extremely vital. And we're lucky enough that we have also an extremely diverse team. So we are actually based globally, like in 7 different European countries, in Mexico and in California currently. So we are spread all over. And actually the kind of impact, and also maybe it's relevant to mention this in the, given that we are in a, with a university audience, is that we really want to advocate for scientific cooperation by connecting with technology transfer offices and brainstorming on creating strategies for technology transfer towards the third sector and nonprofits in public research, which is something that right now is not specifically is not there yet. That there are not separate strategies in technology transfer that target the third sector. Also, we want to advocate for the inclusion of projects with the societal stakeholders in the education programs, and maybe also use our marketplace of projects to help creating that. And also advocating for the inclusion of societal engagement in the academic career reward system as something very important in the journey of a scientist, and overall foster a pro bono culture in academia. So here there are a few information about us. And some of the partners, so please connect with us. But actually, I still have a couple of slides to show, because I think that one of the most, the biggest questions that can be posed at this point, actually, that I also have is well, okay, it's nice to connect different worlds, but actually bringing science outside the lab is extremely difficult, even when we do it at the industry level. And this is why we need so many industry consortia and partnerships, etc. And I would like to question this statement by bringing up actually this other example, which is the founder-led movement in biotech, which is a movement that got started about 2 years ago. And it actually got started with this blog article, so a couple of years ago, about the fact that the future of biotech is founder-led. Why is that? Because there is the financial possibility of, there is the fact that venture capital funding is outstripping the number of companies that are available to invest in. Every year, only about 200 companies are incorporated in the States, and there's way much more capital than the rate of companies that are founded, which has actually been quite stagnating in the past few years. So what happened then with knowing that this was happened, a very big community was born. Actually, I think they just recently launched their website, and they're doing in these few months, if you are in London and a few other places, you can actually go to one of their workshops. They're really building up a community of companies that were founder-led, so founders that were individually, from being scientists in the lab, usually PhDs and postdoc students, were really able to upscale their like solution to like a commercial company, and have different stories that put together a puzzle on how that might be possible. Not only, but actually connecting back with the topic of volunteering, there's actually one volunteer-led organization that has become the key enabler of the founder-led movement in biotech. And the name of that is Nucleate. And it is a nonprofit student-led organization that brings together the largest global community of biotech people to like give a peer-to-peer support system on like how you can bring your research out from the lab just with your own forces in a way. And the key enabler of that is actually the Activator program, which is accelerator like a equity-free accelerator program that facilitates company formation, and that companies that went through this program have raised more than 190 million in the past 3 years that this program has been running for. And there have been like many biotech jobs created and one acquisition. So actually, if you do happen to be in this audience and to be interested into participating in this program and trying out how you could actually lead a company as a solo scientist founder, register here until the 11th of November, and you can participate in the program, which is like several steps that actually teach you how right now it has become possible to actually bring your research out from outside the lab. So I would like to conclude this presentation with also like a small quote from a very interesting book that if you're interested in science policy, you have to read, which is called The Honest Broker. And so the idea is that right now, science needs to have a close engagement with policy, because if scientists ever had the choice to remain above the fray, they right now no longer have this luxury. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Elena, for the very nice talk. It's nice to hear topics that go a bit beyond what we normally talk about, and that's why I was particularly excited to have you here. Yeah, so if we have any questions from the live or online audience, this is the time for it. We have roughly 20 minutes, so there's plenty of time for your questions. So, on-site audience, anything coming up?
Well, I have one question. Like you had a number of goals with, I think the good scientist. The final one was to promote the pro bono culture among scientists, and I was a bit intrigued by that, because actually I would even argue that I'm trying to reduce the pro bono culture in academia and do more stuff and get paid for it rather than do it in my free time, because I'm a good scientist. But I was wondering how you look at this. I mean, or in other words, what was your point with this point?
Yeah. No, I absolutely get your point, and yeah, I think that these two things might also run in parallel. Mm-hmm. Like I think that definitely, like I agree with you. There is definitely a lot that we do pro bono in science, and that yeah, I do agree with that. But actually, what I mean here is that actually the idea of the good scientists, it was initially sparked by like. Some collaborations that we had with the pro bono network of lawyers. So the idea that actually, and there's also an organization that is actually our parallel organization and kind of an advisor of this initiative, like which is called the Good Lobby. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, so like pro bono network in like lawyering, basically it's like when like corporate lawyer offices usually have a mandate to do a certain cases pro bono per year, you know. And there are networks does like sort of marketplaces where actually you as a non-profit can submit your project, and then like all like corporate lawyers that need to do some pro bono can like take and pick from those projects. Mm-hmm. So that was actually the very direct inspiration of our model, and that's the kind of pro bono culture that I mean. So, but yeah, it definitely might be a sentence that might have to be defined given what you say.
Oh, well, I mean, I didn't mean it in a bad way. I was just curious to hear what your thoughts were on academici now, to my feeling, already doing quite a lot of pro bono, and then, but I agree that for when you talk about scientific collaboration, we may want to think about, okay, how can we improve that? How can we engage more with industry? So I do engage, but not pro bono. Also because I would say I'm happy to answer a few questions, and that I do pro bono also for industry if I first have a meeting with them. But then oftentimes it leads to more questions, and but how do I actually need to use your blah blah blah? Yeah, and then kind of it stops. Also because they need to share their secrets or IP or whatever in order for me to help them, and then that whole kind of cooperation can be quite tricky.
That's absolutely true. Like, so first, actually, because like this is definitely already happening. Like, we're not the first people that came up with the idea of connecting words. But what we saw is that there's not a systematic way that these words get connected, and this could leave many actors, like specifically the local stakeholders, completely outside the loop. So our way is like to sort of build an open shop, like an open science shop, kind of like with like every researcher from any field and potentially everywhere geographically that can just connect online very easily with just a simple click from the NGO or a citizen with like anybody. And I think that's like going to be pretty disruptive because right now it's like not happening in this systematic way. So in this way, actually, we could even maybe, I mean, I think this is extremely good feedback because we can definitely implement also in the platform that we are creating, like sort of like a first pro bono conversation. And then actually, if you're somebody like a company and like you have budget for it, that allows you to like connect with everyone and have a first intro call pro bono where you can already give something, but then like kind of enforce like a commercial relationship.
Do you have already some examples? This is an idea, of course, but you want to bring it into practice.
Absolutely. So like, well, we have not launched the platform yet, but like an example that we like to give comes from like one foundation that we are connected with, which is like a foundation of like for like it's a foundation that supports like autistic children and their families, and they have built like a web app that allows like autistic children to experience what's gonna be to go to the hospital like before they are actually there in a sort of interactive way. And they were able to do that by collaborating with like a PhD students that actually like took this project and developed into like their own like paper like project for their PhD. So kind of on the one side like a need that is rooted into society because there is a foundation that is working with families and recognizing that there is a need. And there are some researchers that like are maybe working already on a topic, but they could either invent their own targets or like find them from civil society and be able to connect these two needs. I think that's a pretty powerful example. In that case, actually, it was somebody already from the biomedical field, but in this way, opening a platform like the one that we want to open, I hope that we're really going to be able even to connect like possibly somebody with a software engineer, for instance, right away, you know? So build even like newer connections in between fields, yeah.
And I have two questions. Maybe one is, how does it differ? Because I see some colleagues here also from the Department of Corporate Value Creation, and I'm also in there. So it's embedded within VER to create impact, societal impact for companies. And you're in startups, so you're aware of the existence. So my first question would be, so how does, for especially the good scientists, how does that differ from the support that is embedded within the organization, especially the science shop, where Gerard's from?
Sure.
Yeah, and then the second question, what would be your kind of needs or expectations, both from GeneSprout and from the good scientists? What is the role you see for VER as an institute compared to having the grassroots spirit of all the people connected to it, which has so much power in a very different way?
Wow, I really like the second question also. Yeah, and that's gonna need some brainstorming. So first question, yes, we are absolutely aware of the network that is here. I think that many of you are here also because I tried to like connect with you, and I really want to co-design this with the existing network. I think that if we go back to sort of like theoretically understanding what is already there, I think that the cooperation networks that are there already between science and like local stakeholders are either like regionally rooted, and that's actually what the science shop does. So they sort of like you can confirm it here for me, but it's actually like sort of like a give back of the university to the region and like to the local ecosystem where the university lives. And so this is why the only like NGO local actors that are like taken on board are actually like local actors in the Dutch ecosystem or even the regional ecosystem. And that's one thing that is already there in the science shop network. On the other side, there are indeed like international cooperation projects going on in academia. But that's usually like very long range, you know, like geographical distance. That means that there are many impediments along the way. Like usually it's the DPI, of course, that is managing the collaboration, and maybe not everyone can go and connect with the local actors or like speak with them, or like there's not much choice from like, for instance, a master's student designing their thesis or a PhD student to choose who they want to work with, but just they get on board to like labs that are already working with somebody. So given these two sort of extremes that definitely are there, we want to build something that more systematically decreases like the barriers to actually communicate between, like, you know, like if you're an individual researcher, you can talk with a local stakeholder without having to jump on board like a lab that already has very established relationships, and or without having to just think very regionally of what NGOs are there. So we think that in our way of being a little bit more like democratic and like online tool where everybody can connect with each other, we can lower barriers for outreach for everyone. Does that answer?
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree, and I do see actually the difference between the others, GUR initiative in that sense. But going back to the pro bono point that was mentioned before, I think it would be important for the good scientists to keep a clear focus. If you want to act to make impact, and you want to only give advice to NGO and, you know, like people that do not have a profit behind that advice, or at least not in terms of being a company already, then I would focus into that. And that you can really frame it as a goal also of the university to make an impact through their scientists directly into society. And that, I don't know, it could become part of like, okay, 1 hour per month, PhD can be paid to invest that hours giving advice. So it's not really consultancy for free, but it's also not consultancy for company, because then I wouldn't agree that a PhD is paid to give consultancy for free to a company that is already in the market.
Well, it can happen, but absolutely.
But so if you frame it really as an impact for society, and you want to target this non-profit market and segment, then you could try to convince the university into like, we want to allocate some hours of a PhD or a postdoc into giving advice, because this is a way for us as an institution to make impact.
Mm-hmm.
But then you need to keep the clear cut of like, we are not doing this for commercial purpose of company that can actually pay eventually, you know, to have a consultancy, because then you also kind of skew the market and you shouldn't get there.
That's exactly the kind of relationship that we would really like to have with Wageningen. And also, like, we want to just be a tool also for what's already there. So for instance, if like the science shop also is looking for NGOs regionally, or are looking for scientists within Wageningen that would like to connect with their NGOs, they can also use the marketplace and just keep their own targets clear and make use of this.
And regarding the marketplace, so can anyone submit a project, and do you have like some restriction or frame? Because, or like, I mean, I hope and guess it's not like everyone can submit whatever there, but
Absolutely. We have intake forms that we are like revising. So we ask several questions on the dimension of the NGO, the funding, how many volunteers there are, like is it fully made of like employees and like full-time employees, or is it only like a grassroots volunteering initiative? So we first, before letting people in, we have like a sort of
so you screen
process.
them.
Exactly.
Okay.
If I may just, I just wanted to check if there's any questions from the online audience. So if anybody still has a question, feel free to type in the chat or just speak up. We are listening to you. So yeah. If not, we'll jump right back into it.
I want to make it quick. Agatha, was it?
Agatha, yeah.
Agatha. So I think that was a good point also because once you start to talk to profit-making entities, oftentimes, you need to sign NDAs, the whole legal framework. And I can, from my own experience, that was for me at least quite a challenge to at least understand, all of it and undergo the whole process. I did it twice now with 2 different companies. And by the way, I do it in my free time, so I do it on a personal title. So it's not directly connected to the work, but that's also because that would even make it more complicated. If it would have been easier, I would have also considered that. So if that is still something you plan like to do on the longer term, let's say, or even now, that part could be also very helpful if there is support to read and understand NDA in a way that it is possible, or at least do some consultancy on that.
That would be very interesting, but it would put us in a lot of like legal liability. We really hope just to suggest people to connect with each other. Mm-hmm. We already have a disclaimer that any recommendation also is going to be shared by scientists. We don't say that that's like good advice. We don't. But no, it's.
I understand, Elena. So that is also not what I was implying. But more like, hey, that is something maybe on the longer run, not to do the actual kind of filling out, but like okay, ask some questions like what does this clause actually mean, or what? So that is one, and 2, I would turn it more positive. Like, what can you discuss with an NGO, or what can you discuss even with a profit?
As a scientist.
Yeah. Like it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
Like instead of focusing on what is not possible. Like, for example, I can explain my topic to anyone, right? There's no harm there, right? But I cannot give advice on how to implement it directly for a profit-making entity without, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that part of that's indeed good feedback. Indeed, what the stakeholders that we want to serve are more like not-for-profit entities so far. It's also the idea that right now we have this model of like communicating with, not communicating to. So hopefully the type of connections, also conversations that we're going to have are going to be with like first the local like stakeholder explaining their need, and then you sort of thinking like what do I know that could be useful for them, so it's not going to be like a bare presentation of like what's your work, because like otherwise maybe it's going to be difficult to understand how to implement it, but it's going to be more responding to needs that are posed by the stakeholder, which I think is something that is not being tried out a lot in the and actually, there was the second question, which was like about how you expect the board as an institute to what to do. So I would say that it's something that would be very interesting to discuss with you all actually. So we really hope in this way just to like build a stronger connection, like with the good scientists, to build a stronger connection, like a stronger awareness also on the individual scientists on how you can transform science, right? And like join groups that are transformative. But we tried to reach out to the Science Shop and CVC quite early on, because we recognize that also universities want to also to capitalize on the impact that they're building. And actually the fact that there are not many networks like this also makes it more difficult for Wageningen to track what's the impact that they're generating. Like in some of these websites, it's not really displayed or shown like how many NGOs were helped in this and this way. There are not metrics, there are not many impact metrics. So actually what we're gonna implement in our platforms is that after the connection is made, you're going to be sent a survey. We're going to send a survey to the NGO. We're going to find like the metrics. Were you able to implement the science? Was it really useful for you? And then this data can be made available to the specific institutions that partner with us, So in a way, yeah, we really want to benefit what's already there. And happy to collaborate. Yeah. Gerard?
Well, I think it is a good idea that we continue our talks. I know that you have talked already with my colleague, Lenneke Pfeiffer, from the Science Shop. And, well, that's the first beginning. I think we can collaborate more in the near future. I think there are many things that are in parallel between the Good Scientist and the Science Shop.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm very curious how it's also just something to think of that when you want to make something the standard kind of for scientists to be a good scientist and making societal impact by being open to being approached by others via this 1 hour a week, let's say, that is it then the way to do it via a platform like this, and then first you become part of that platform and then it slowly spreads and then everybody kind of becomes part of it, hopefully, or a part of the organization? Or does it then become something separate, like, okay, some people do it and others don't, and if you are not part of the Good Scientist platform, then apparently you're not a good scientist, while others are maybe part of, make impact in a different way. And I think that it's something to think of, because we're researchers now. Everybody can be found on the internet. You can submit in a contact form. You can every project, every researcher has already the data there, and you can submit your questions already, and it's happening. People do get, scientists from both the research side and university side, get these kind of questions, and then it could be an effect that then suddenly people think, oh yeah, no, then you have to go to the Good Scientists to do that. While it also now happens that people are just approached.
No, I totally agree with that. I also think that though, and that's awesome that it's already happening, but there are some weaker links with like psychological barriers that some local stakeholders or citizens might have that prevent that from happening. So this is why also. And we have this marketing team that is growing, and 2 people that are international cooperations officers in the team. So really have worked a lot in NGOs in the biomedical and environmental sector. We want to market our solution to NGOs, so in a way to be like connectors, to sort of have our face that sort of lowers barriers for NGOs to get on board and get engaged. I think that even though it's theoretically everything like you can theoretically, of course, contact everyone in academia, emails are there, but we need to do a step further to really enable even the weaker links to emerge, and that's also like one of the most controversial aspects of open science. You can put all papers tomorrow like open in PDFs anywhere, but like an NGO, how could they read it and understand? We need to do more as scientists to actually bridge this gap, and I think the Good Scientist is like the kind of step forward that tries actually to build the connections a bit. So we're gonna bring NGO hubs on board and like NGOs on board.
So, Elena, could you give one example of how then you think the barrier can be lowered? Because you mentioned that is the aim, and in theory, an NGO can come to the campus and look around and even call a scientist because the phone numbers are online and ask, can we talk? Because I'm curious about this or that. Okay, it doesn't really happen a lot. So could you give an example how you think the barrier can be lowered?
Yeah, so for instance, an example, and I will not mention the...
Sorry, I have to leave.
Yeah, sure.
So, see you. Bye-bye.
An example is like from an NGO hub that I will not name right now because the partnership is not official yet. But there are like hubs of like 100, 150 more NGOs that exist that sort of act as like memberships to I don't know, like build the knowledge networks and also have like office space and facilities for them. And an example is that we are like could become their service providers of like being their sort of online database of what scientists could be directly available for them. So that's an example of like NGO hubs that currently don't really give a service to their own NGOs on like how to connect with researchers and like what are the best ways and like you know, like, and that could be a tangible example of what we could do. And indeed, like also another example is actually given more in the technology domain that I didn't really want to touch thus far, but it's like, for instance, like when I was in the States, I was actually interviewing technology transfer offices on like if they ever transferred that technology to like NGOs. And that happened only a few times when there were some NGOs that were bold enough to ask, can I use that technology? And the answer was always yes by default. And it's in some commitments by the university that if an NGO asks, they have to reply yes, of course, like here it is, right? And there was, for instance, like a group of citizens in an African country, I don't remember right now, that really had wanted to access like some a drug that they had developed at Berkeley against glaucoma, and then they were able like to speak with the like. They reached out to the not-for-profit, like to the university, and then they said, yes, you can have the drug, and actually that connection was made. Yeah. I think it needs like a huge effort from the non-profit to actually do that outreach on, you know, in the first time. So there might be so many people that we're not reaching out to yet. But yeah, we just started recently, so we hope to have more of these.
I'm just trying to make it more tangible, like lower the barrier.
Nice. I guess in light of time, we should at least close the session, kill the recording, and you guys can go on discussing as long as you want. But for the record, let me thank you. Thanks very much, Elena, for joining us for this very interesting presentation and for this very interesting perspective you gave us. So you left all of your contacts, so if anyone also maybe watching the recording later on wants to get in touch with you, it's fairly easy. Thanks everyone for joining, for making this session very nice. And next session will be on the 7th of November. We'll soon have another announcement and another interesting one coming up. So thanks everyone.
Great.
Bye. Thank you.